NASCAR conducts the next-gen test at the Charlotte Oval. The practice qualifying format has been officially revealed for 2022, and there's a lot to talk about from that. And 2311 confirms that they have acquired the charter from Starcom Racing. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR story sets here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those very, very quickly. We're going to start off with Kyle Larson. As Elk Grove, California and Sonoma Raceway are going to be celebrating Kyle Larson's 2021 championship this upcoming Monday. There'll be basically a parade out there, and the president of the track, I believe Julia Geese, whoever is the president of the track, is also going to be celebrating with Kyle Larson at the same time as well. This is really, really cool that they are doing this. It's really cool to see that a hometown is really, really going to be going in on this. I think this is really, 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 really awesome. And if you have a track that is also really close, I believe the Elk Grove, California, the fact that a racetrack like that is going to be out there and supporting Kyle Larson is going to be doing that, I think is really, really awesome. It's really, really cool. And I'm really happy to see that they're doing this for next year. I think it's really, really awesome. And I'm really happy about this overall for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Mason Maggio. As Mason Maggio is going to be joining Rickmar Racing's development program for the 2022 season. He'll be racing in the California Pro Late Model Series in 2022 and the Rickmar Racing number 51 Ford. I'm not sure how much I know about Mason Maggio. I know he's been racing for a couple years now. He's a guy that's been up and coming. It's really cool to see that Rickmar is having a development program. It shows that they are taking stuff seriously, and you really never know. We could see Mason Maggio long-term if Rickmar decides to expand to the Truck Series or something, or expands like to an ARCA program. Maybe he ends up going there long-term, but I do think it's really cool that they have a development program. We've seen some newer teams like Rayoon Brothers. They've got a development program. They're going to be starting up with Jonathan Cuevas, and I can't remember the other guy. They have a program that they're starting with for next year, but I do think that this is really, really exciting overall that Mason Maggio will be joining this as a Rickmar development driver. I think it's really, really awesome, and I'm happy about this overall for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Sam Mayer. Now, there were a couple of plushies that were revealed basically on Facebook, and it looks like that Sam Mayer is officially going to be in the one car in the 2022 season. We already know that Sam Mayer is going to be back at Junior Motorsports in 2022 on a full-time basis. Team expected to be Noah Grayson, Sam Mayer, Josh Berry, and JL Jr. is going to run one, and Justin Allgaier in the cars as well. And a lot of speculation had been that Sam Mayer was going to be in the one car in 2022, but it looks like it is officially confirmed that that is going to be happening for 2022. That means that the crew chief, I think Mike Buck, I can't remember who the crew chief is for, who the crew chief was for Michael Knight or that one car, but it looks like he'll probably work with that same crew chief as well. I'll be honest, Sam Mayer's rookie season, first half of the year, everyone had really high expectations, and he really did not perform up to par, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think that he's a driver that sucks. I just think for a driver that doesn't have a lot of experience, he didn't run the full season, which I think he should have ran full-time in trucks this year, then probably should have jumped up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2022. I think it would have made a lot more sense for him as a race car driver. I think jumping into the deep end really, I think, unfortunately affected him. So, it's very intriguing to see if he will officially go that one, but it looks like he'll be in the one car for Junior Motorsports in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Kentucky Speedway. Now, there was an SMI report in regards to the purchase of Nashville and Dover, the Dover Motorsports Incorporated with SMI buying up. It looks like that Kentucky Speedway is no longer listed among the premier facilities that Speedway Motorsports Incorporated operates at this current moment. Now, Kentucky Speedway has not hosted a NASCAR Cup Series race since 2020. They did not host one in 2021, and it looks like they basically are going to be turning that into a park. It looks like Kentucky has unfortunately been forgotten. Now, we all know the tumultuous history of Kentucky Speedway. There was so much hype around the first event, and then you had the major traffic issues that happened in 2011, and after 2011, they lost a lot of their attendance. Then they started adding PG1, I believe, around 2017 and 2018, and then they changed and reconfigured the track, and the racing got worse than it already had been. And let's be for real, even in the Gen 5 era, the racing really wasn't that good. You had pretty good racing in the Gen 5 era, but at Kentucky Speedway, even in the first year when the 2011 season was really, really good, the Kentucky race overall was not a really, really fantastic race. So this is not surprising that this is happening, to be perfectly honest with you, that it's no longer listed. It's not a track that really produced the greatest racing. You had a lot of people that were honestly really shocked about it at the same time, but I think it's really, really unfortunate to happen, but it is what it is, and it looks like Kentucky is no longer listed as a racetrack that they currently own at the moment. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Eldora Speedway, as they are going to be bringing back a special event in 2022 called the Eldora million in 2022, which will take place on June 9th in 2022. They've ran this, I think, a couple times. Actually, they've ran this quite a bit, and it's a major event. And if you end up winning the race, end up winning the main A feature, you actually will be able to win $1 million. As this is probably going to be the most prestigious event, and I would not be shocked if you see a ton of drivers, and especially if there is time away from the track, if drivers can get out to this event. Would not be shocked if you see some guys that run dirt, like maybe like Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, perhaps, who will come out to Eldora Speedway and run that event. I mean, look back last year, Kyle Larson ran so many dirt events, and he won a lot of those. But I think that this is really, really awesome that they're bringing back this event. This is going to bring a lot of people in. And also, the fact that the purse is going to be that much also is really, really cool. So the fact that they're bringing this back is really, really awesome. And I'm really looking forward to this event. I definitely going to have to check out the event. You never know. I may be out there, so wait to see what happens. But the Eldora Speedway will be hosting the Eldora Million. It's a great event overall, and I'm really happy that they're bringing this event back overall for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the North Carolina budget for the racetracks. Now, we talked about that they have been talking about doing this, and they basically were on the verge of having this go through. Well, yesterday evening, during when the next gen test was going on, it was revealed that North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper has signed the state budget from North Carolina, which means that North Wilkesboro is going to get $18 million. There will be $9 million that will be going to Rockingham, and there will be $13 million going to Charlotte Motor Speedway. A lot of it is for renovations around the track. Now, currently, North Wilkesboro, they've had $1 million investment come in from Marcus Simonis, and now it looks like they're going to have another $18 million, which means that their total up for the track will be up to $19 million, which originally they were only going to end up getting, I think, $10 million. But the fact that they've increased the budget is really, really awesome. And the track has a lot of work that needs to be done, but the fact that this budget has gone through, I think, is going to really help. And if North Wilkesboro is to come back, people need to go out there and support the track and make sure that the track is able to have bring people in. Because if they can bring people in, the better it is going to be. And again, they haven't had racing there in 10 years, and there's a very strong chance that could happen. $9 million to Rockingham is very interesting. Now, unlike North Wilkesboro, where the track still needs a lot done, like plumbing and all that stuff needs to be done, Rockingham Speedway actually does not need as much done as North Wilkesboro. As a matter of fact, the track has basically been worked on, and it's pretty much race ready, except they've had tire issues, and that's why they haven't really had racing in Rockingham, but they've had to try to have the cars label out a Pro Tour at that track, but they've overall had issues. So they can figure out a way to have no more tire problems. And if they can get $9 million in there, that probably will be able to repay the track and get the track back up to speed. And $13 million at Charlotte absolutely makes a lot of sense. Charlotte Motor Speedway is going to get a lot of money. I think they've had some sewage issues in the past, especially in the 90s. I know they've tried to fix those problems. But at the same time, it's good to see that they at least are going to be working on that. I'm really happy about this. And again, it's really cool to see, at least for sure, that they are going to go ahead and at least give money to them. I think it's really awesome. And I think the future of some of these tracks is in good shape. So really happy overall about this for sure. And this is great to hear. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson. As Jimmie Johnson is going to be competing in the 2022 Race of Champions at Sweden, and they'll be racing on ice with, I think, the off-road, like the cars, like the rally cars. And his teammate is going to be none other than Travis Pastrana, who currently competes in the Nitro Rallycross and is a legend driver in rallycross racing. This event has been an event that has been around for a very, very long time. Many NASCAR drivers have competed in this event, including guys like Carl Edwards, Jeff Gordon, and Kyle Busch, and I think Kurt Busch as well, have all competed in the Race of Champions. And Jimmie Johnson also has, I believe, competed in the Race of Champions as well, and has been up front in the past. I think he ran either in 2009 or 2010, but the fact they're bringing Jimmie Johnson back, I think, is really, really awesome. And it's a major, major event that happens every year. I think they had the event in 2019 in Miami. I think Kyle Busch and Kurt Busch were the two that competed in that. I don't remember if they had that in 20. I think they had that last year, maybe, if I don't entirely remember. But I think it's really awesome. And Jimmie Johnson is going to be competing in that event. And it's going to be on ice too, which is really, really fun. And it's going to be in Europe, which I think, again, it's really, really exciting overall. They're bringing this event back. I think, again, it's a huge event. It's a great event for the sport as a whole. And it's going to bring a lot of eyes in here, especially for all types. It's unclear what other drivers are going to be racing. Usually they have two drivers from different countries. And this is, again, really, really awesome. I'm glad to see that Jimmie Johnson will be competing in the Race of Champions in Sweden. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jeremy Donnelly. As Jeremy Donnelly is going to be crew chiefing for Ty Dillon at GMS Racing in the Cup Series in 2022. For those of you who do not know much about Jeremy Donnelly has been the race engineer for the number 42 car at Chip Ganassi Racing for the last 9 seasons. He started working as a crew chief for their, not crew chief, as an engineer for their team, I believe around 2013 and 2014. So he's worked as a race engineer for Kyle Larson, Juan Montoya, Matt Kenseth, and now Ross Chastain. So he does have that engineering experience. Now, I do believe this will be the first time that Jeremy Donnelly, I believe, will be crew chiefing up on the pit box. I don't think he's ever done it before. So this is definitely a new face that's getting into the team. So I'm not entirely sure how much he's going to play into factor. Now, we know that the 42 car has shown quite a bit of good speed, so hopefully his engineering experience can come in and help him out. But it's definitely interesting that he is going to be the crew chief. Again, you would think they have, because there have been some talk maybe at one point Dave L is maybe going to go over to GMS Racing since they had association. But again, we have to remember that RCR basically is kind of helping them with their alliance. A lot of people thought it'd be Hendrick that'd be giving them the stuff, but they have an alliance with RCR going into next season. Of course, it does help that Ty Dillon is going to be the driver next year. So Jeremy Donnelly is going to be a crew chief next year. I think it's really, really interesting. Hopefully, Jeremy Donnelly can come in there and help him do really well. I'd like to see him do well next year, and hopefully he's going to be able to help him in that next year's season and help him if they can get a charter too. Hopefully they can help them run well next season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Noah Gragson. As Noah Gragson is going to be attempting the Daytona 500 in 2022 in the number 62 car for Beer Motorsports once again. In 2021, Noah Gragson actually did attempt to make Daytona 500, but unfortunately they got involved in a wreck and were not able to make it into the Daytona 500 in that 62 car. They had a lot of speed and they actually were most likely going to end up making the show in that race, but unfortunately what ended up happening for Noah Gragson is that unfortunately, like I said, he got involved in that wreck and got taken out. Now, Noah Gragson, I think, has a very, very strong shot of making Daytona 500 next year. I think, one, they're going to put a lot of speed into that 62 car. I think that's one thing that's going to benefit them. But another thing I think that's going to benefit Noah Gragson going into next season is that Noah Gragson has a lot of super speedway experience. And Noah Gragson has won at Daytona 4. As a matter of fact, he won in 2020 in the season opener. He got a couple wins in 2021, but he'll be looking to start off the year really, really strong. And if Noah Gragson is able to make Daytona 500, which I do think he has a very strong shot of making Daytona 500 in 2022, I think that Noah Gragson, honestly, this will be his first ever NASCAR Cup Series race. That's right. If he's able to qualify in, he'll make his NASCAR Cup Series debut at Daytona. Now, it's unclear if this will be the only race that Noah Gragson is going to run, or if they're going to make the other 3 races. He's going to run the other 3 super speed races if Beer Motorsports chooses to do so, which it doesn't surprise me either. Noah Gragson is the one they're choosing. Noah Gragson does have a lot of experience with basically the team Beer Motorsports. Their driver was Brendan Gaughan, who was also from, you guessed it, Las Vegas. So I really am overall happy to see that Noah Gragson is going to be driving for Beer Motorsports next year, at least as a driver for Daytona 500. I think it's really awesome he will drive the car, and hopefully he's able to qualify for Daytona 500, which I do think that experience in itself is going to help Noah Gragson going into next year. So I'm overall very, very happy about this. I think this is great for the sport that he's going to be racing in that car. It's really awesome. I'm glad to see that he will be racing in the Daytona 500, or attempting to qualify for Daytona 500, because they don't have a charter, so they will have to qualify in the Daytona 500 on speed, or making it on the duels. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the 2022 Motocross schedule that has officially been revealed, the Monster Energy Supercross Series schedule that was revealed yesterday. So the season is going to kick off at Anaheim on January 8th, 2022. Then the next week, we're going to go to Oakland on January 15th, 2022. Then we'll go to San Diego on January 22nd, 2022. And then the next week, we'll go back to Anaheim on January 29th. Right after that, we'll go to Glendale on February 5th, and then we'll head back to Anaheim for the 3rd time in 6 races on February 12th. Then we'll go to Minneapolis on February 19th, and then we'll go to Arlington on February 26th. Then we'll go to Daytona International Speedway May 5th, and then we'll go to Detroit on March 12th, followed by Indianapolis on March 19th, and then we'll go to Seattle on March 26th. Then we will have a 1-week break, I think, for Easter, and then we'll go to St. Louis on April 9th. We'll be heading down to the Edward Jones Dome on April 9th, followed by Atlanta Motor Speedway on April 16th. Then we'll go to Foxborough on April 23rd. Then we'll go to Denver on April 30th, and then we will finally end the season at Salt Lake City on May 7th of 2022. Very short season, only 5 seasons, but of course the drivers, it's a very, very dangerous sport, so you don't want the season going for too long because you could unfortunately put a lot of drivers in danger. But a lot of familiar tracks returning. It's very interesting that there's going to be 3 races in Anaheim, but they will be racing Atlanta Motor Speedway, and they'll also be racing at Daytona International Speedway as well. They put on some really, really good racing. It was very, I didn't get to really watch motocross, but definitely, I got to start getting into motocross. I think it'd be really, really cool to watch. And again, I do like the schedule as a whole. I think it's really, really good. And again, it's a short season. It's only I believe it's only 17 races long. So a very short season. Kicking off on the West Coast, ending kind of similarly close to the West Coast. Really, really awesome to see the motocross schedule. I do like it overall. I think they did a great job as a whole on the schedule. I like it a lot, and that is your motocross schedule for the 2022 season. Now we're going to move on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about Conor Daly. As Conor Daly was recently on a podcast, and he says he's looking to return to IndyCar full-time in 2022 with Ed Carpenter Racing, but has a plan B, and it's to race full-time in the Camping World Truck Series in 2022. Now, he did not disclose the Truck Series team, but I have a potential where I think he could end up going next year if he does come back to trucks. Now, I do think that he's very, it's going to be very tough for him to go full-time with Ed Carpenter Racing, considering the Air Force literally just a day or two ago, I don't know when this podcast got released, and I don't know when they were talking, but basically, the Air Force basically dropped their sponsorship with Ed Carpenter Racing about a day or two ago. So I do think that talks been potentially return to Ed Carpenter Racing are very, very unlikely. Now, there are a few potential teams that Conor Daly could go to. Juncos Racing and Carlin are merging, I believe, for next year. They basically have been confirmed that they're merging for next year, and they're going to have 2 cars, and they do have a second car available. And he has raced for Carlin Racing in the past for the last couple of years, so he could definitely be potentially where he could end up going next year if that's the case for IndyCar, if he wants to remain in IndyCar, because there's not a ton of rides left for IndyCar right now. But I think he could still be also coming to NASCAR. Now, what team do I believe that Conor Daly will go to if he does go to the trucks? There's one team that I think he'll go to if he goes to trucks. I know the Nice Motorsports has indicated they're probably only going to run 3 trucks next year. But I believe, especially for Conor Daly, I think that there is a very strong chance that Conor Daly will get into a 4th Nice Motorsports truck full-time. I think that he has a little bit of sponsorship that he does bring, not a ton, which is why he's been a little bit struggling when it comes to finding rides for next year. But I do think that Conor Daly could bring in some funding, and Nice Motorsports also does have a little bit of funding as well. And Conor Daly has been with Nice Motorsports a couple times in the Truck Series. And I think it'd be really cool to have another IndyCar driver come over to NASCAR. We know that there's been drivers that have been associated coming to NASCAR. Marco Andretti said he potentially could be racing Xfinity with Superhouse Racing in a second car if they do expand for next season. You've had Santino Ferrucci come over so far to Xfinity, which he could definitely come over there, maybe race full-time next year with Sam Hunt Racing. We don't know who's going to drive for it, but he's definitely got to be a driver that is up for consideration, considering he won't be back at Rahal next year. We know that for a fact, as their lineup has been announced for IndyCar. But it's really cool to see the Conor Daly, and also James Davison too, but it's really cool. It'd be awesome to see Conor Daly come over. He's a guy that has a lot of energy. He's actually had some decent stats in the truck, so they haven't been impressive. But again, he doesn't run on a full-time basis. I think he'd be able to hone in and hold in that craft that he has. And I do hope that he does overall have an opportunity to come into NASCAR. I think it'd be really cool to see a driver like him come over to NASCAR. I think it's really, really awesome. Hopefully, he will have an opportunity to potentially come over to NASCAR next season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Hailie Deegan. As Hailie Deegan is expected to return to DJR Racing in 2022 in the number 1 car, according to a team representative from the DJR Racing camp. This makes a lot of sense. Hailie Deegan has been driving for DJR Racing in 2021, and let's say for real, her statistics in 2021 were really not that impressive. I think her average finish this year was like a 20th place average finish, which I expected the average finish to be a little bit higher, but you'd think that she did end up finishing, I believe, in the top 20 in the Truck Series points, but she was one of the lowest in the Truck Series points. Now, I do think that the more experience she gets, the better she's going to do it, and I think the fact that she's not just going to just jump straight up to Xfinity like some drivers do, and she's going to hone her craft. Yes, she does. It does help that she has Monster Energy and Tenda and a couple other sponsors that are helping her out, or Titers, whatever sponsors she has that are helping her. But at the same time, I think that Hailie Deegan will do really, really wonders for running at least one more year in the Truck Series. On top of that, she has talked about that she potentially wants to run in the NASCAR Xfinity Series on a part-time basis next year, which I really do hope she does get that opportunity, whether it's with SHR if they do expand to a second truck, or if Team Penske does return to some aspect in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, whether they have a full rotation of Cup Series drivers in their program, or if they do have one full-time driver in their car, but she's not going to be that driver. But at the same time, I think Hailie Deegan going back to DJR makes a lot of sense. I'm really happy about this, and I'm glad that at least she understands, hey, we need one more year. We're going to do really well, and hopefully I'll do much better. I do think in the second year, she has to improve with DJR. She's got to be more consistently a top 10 driver. She's got to show a lot more speed, and I got to see DJR show a little more speed as an organization, because if they can do that, that, she'll be in a much better position as a driver. But hopefully she do really, really well next year. I hope it happens for her, and she'll be returning to the team. Really excited to see that she'll be back with that team. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Joey Gase. As Joey Gase announced yesterday that he is going to be forming an Xfinity Series team in 2022 called Joey Gase Racing, or JGR for short, which is basically a ripoff of Joe Gibbs Racing. He'll be in the number 35 car. He'll be driving in that car on a full-time basis, and they have bought remaining stuff from the H2 Motorsports organization. He actually did say that they've already ran 2 races this year. I think when he drove for Jimmy Means Racing, apparently those were his own cars, and kind of made up a little bit of lie saying he was running in the top 10 at the 15 to go, which really was far from the truth, considering he was running 17th and 20th and all stuff. We had photo evidence come out of that and where he was running on the leaderboard at the time. But I am very intrigued to see how he does. He had H2 Motorsports stuff, which that equipment was really, really decent. Their car equipment were in top 10 and top 15. And it's definitely really interesting. Joey Gase is a driver that I'm very intrigued to see how he'll do in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Because I'll be honest, his time in Cup really has not been impressive, which tells me that probably he got kicked out of Rickmar Racing, probably because his performances were not really that great, and they probably were not going to be wanting him to come back. I know he has sponsorship, which, again, this probably does help that he'll probably have donatelife.org, which is organ donors and stuff that will probably be able to help him out, fund the team. But what are my expectations for Joey Gase Racing? I'm not coming into this year with a lot of expectations, just because it is a new team, and Joey Gase has not really been able to prove himself in the NASCAR Xfinity Series or Cup Series or whatever series he's ran. He's really not been able to show what he can be able to do. But this is, I'm really glad to see that another driver at least is going to be forming another team, and it's glad to see that Xfinity Series is going to be expanding. Another thing that's really, really important to note, too, another aspect that's going to be important, is they're going to have to hope that practice qualifying well, there's me practice qualifying, but they're going to have to hope that they're going to be able to qualify into the race, because, again, owner's points will be a thing, and that's something, and NASCAR is not going to go to that old format next year, which is a good thing. But at the same time, they better hope they can get into these races, because, again, there's going to be a lot of cars that are going to be attempting to qualify for Daytona. There's rumors about potentially 50 cars that could be racing at Daytona for the Xfinity Series, so we're going to have to wait and see in regards to that, but a new team coming to Xfinity is really, really awesome. And I'm happy to see Joey Gase will be forming an Xfinity Series team for next season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Joe Gibbs Racing, as Dave Rodgers, who's going to be moving over to 2311 Racing after crew chiefing in the 18 car for Joe Gibbs Racing in the Xfinity Series. He says that Joe Gibbs Racing is planning to downsize from a 4-car team to a 3-car team in the 2022 season. There have been rumors and speculation that this was going to happen for 2022, but the fact that Dave Rodgers is coming in to confirm does not surprise me one bit. Now, what do I expect the rotation to be for next year? We do know that Brandon Jones has been confirmed to the 19 for the team next year. I think that here's what's going to happen with the lineup. I think that the 18 car is going to be where Ty Gibbs is going to go. I don't think that, unless they put him in the 54. But I think that Ty Gibbs will be in the flagship 18. I think that they're going to get rid of the 20 next year. I know that's going to be shocked because the 20 has been in their program for a very, very long time, since around 1999 or 2000. But I think they're going to get rid of the 20 number. And I think going into next year, they're going to end up keeping the 54. And that is going to be a rotation of drivers, of upcoming drivers that are in the Toyota development program, some guys from the KBM team, and drivers from the Cup Series. Now, who do I expect to be in those cars? I expect Bubba Wallace to get some starts with Joe Gibbs Racing. I think they're going to give him starts since he's been in their program. I would not be shocked if Kurt Busch does drive for that car. I think Kurt Busch could drive in that car. Christopher Bell will probably be in there. John Hunter Nemechek, Denny Hamlin, probably Martin Truex Jr. Chandler Smith will probably get some starts. And maybe even Corey Haim will get starts in Xfinity next year. But I think they're going to choose drivers that are in the Toyota development program who are up and coming, and drivers that are in the Cup Series. Because we know that for sure at the moment that Kyle Busch will not be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing's Xfinity Series program next season. So that's something that was confirmed when he basically confirmed all the way back in Nashville when he won that last race in Texas, when he won his last race in there. But I'm really intrigued to see what happens in regards to what drivers they choose. But we know that Ty Gibbs is expected to be there. I want to see Joe Gibbs finally announce Ty Gibbs. We're less than 3 months this season, and we still have no confirmation in regards to that. He's expected to be full-time with the team, but at the same time, I hope we do get an announcement in regards to that really, really soon. It makes a lot of sense for them to go downsize to 3 cars. I think that's why they struggled this year, because the 54 car pretty much won every single race except the last season finale, which is very interesting, is they gave the 54 car from Atlanta, I think it was Atlanta or something, over to Daniel Hemrick, or I think it was a Pocono chassis they gave to Daniel Hemrick for the season finale, which is something that was also very, very interesting. But really, really good that they're going to downsize. Sucks that they're downsizing, but at the same time, it's better to focus on 3 cars. I think it makes a lot more sense, and they'll be downsizing to a 3-car operation in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 3 major stories of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the practice and qualifying format that has officially been revealed for the 2022 season. And there is a lot to go over, so pay attention. So, practice qualifying is returning for every single race in 2022. Now, something that's going to be very interesting, it's going to be similar to Formula 1 and IndyCar when it comes to the knockout style. For the oval tracks, there'll be 2 groups of qualifying, and there'll be single lap ones. Group A there'll be Group A and a Group B, which will have, I think it'll be 15 minutes of qualifying. I think it's going to be 10 minutes each, if I remember correctly, and there'll be only 15 minutes of practice. And the top 5 from each of those will transfer, which will have 10 cars in the final round, and then they'll decide who will get the pole in those 10 cars. For super speedways, there'll be single car laps of qualifying, and the top 10 will transfer, and there will be no practice for the super speedways. For the road courses, there'll be 20 minutes of practice, and there'll be 2 groups of qualifying, which will each have 15-minute time sessions. In the top 5 of each session of those, we'll move on to the final round. And for Bristol Dirt, it'll be traditional heats. There will be extended weekends as well for only 6 Cup Series races, 5 Xfinity Series races, and 8 Truck Series races, for 8 or 7 Truck Series races for next year. So, for the Cup Series, it'll be Daytona 500, Atlanta, Bristol Dirt, Gateway, Nashville, and Phoenix. Daytona 500 because it's opening up the season. Atlanta because of the new reconfiguration. Bristol Dirt because it's a dirt track. Gateway because it's a new track. Nashville, a little shocking that Nashville's getting another opportunity, but probably because of new tire wear perhaps. And Phoenix because of the championship weekend. For Xfinity, it'll be Daytona, Atlanta, Portland, Nashville, and Phoenix. And for the Truck Series, it'll be Daytona, Atlanta, Bristol Dirt, Knoxville, Sonoma, Mid-Ohio, Nashville, and Phoenix. Trucks has a lot of new tracks on there. I'm a little surprised that IRP's not on there. I thought IRP would have been one of the tracks that got officially added. That's a little shocking to me. Let's talk about some things from this test and the announcements. I'm really happy that practice qualifying is coming back next year at every single track. That is a major, major positive. And I will say that I do overall like the qualifying knockout format. I do overall like that. I know it's a little bit confusing. There's a lot to go over. I just wish it would be traditional, but at the same time, I do like that it's knockout qualifying. It's very similar to what Formula 1 and IndyCar does, which their system works out very, very well. And I wish it was single car qualifying, but I do like the qualifying format. But I do have overall an issue with the fact of the lack of practice for multiple reasons. Number one, 15 minutes of practice, except on those non-extended weekends, because there are extended weekends for next year, which at least you're going to get some practices with 50 minutes each. My issue is there's a couple reasons. One, I think that the weekend is going to be a little bit slim down. Now, for Cup, it's 2 hours long because of qualifying and practice, and then it will be 90 minutes for Xfinity and trucks next year. But that's going to be less time on the track, and it's going to be less track time for the fans at the races for practice sessions. Only 15 minutes is really not enough practice. One, you're going to be able to make adjustments on the cars. I assume they're going to be impound too. I believe they announced that they are going to be impound for next season as well. But the lack of practice, 15 minutes, like I said, not a fan of it. Number one, lack of track time. Number two, I personally think that to be able to make adjustments on the cars, at least qualifying, like I said, is going to be back. But at the same time, I think more than 15 minutes needs to be a thing. I think that at every practice session, for me, we shouldn't have more than one practice session. I believe that every single one should be 50-minute practice sessions for each of them to give enough time, especially on the road courses. I think road courses only get maybe 20 minutes of practice going into next season, which, again, I wish that there was a little more practice than that. I think 15 minutes is a little bit short. I wish there was more. Again, I do like the qualifying. I do like that a lot. I do not like the lack of practice. I personally think we need more practice sessions. I think that at least we'll get 6 races, but at the same time, I wish that there was more practice going into next year, especially since fans are going to be spending a lot of money. Now, I also assume that all these are probably going to take place on the day for each of the races. I would assume that some of them will happen. I think for trucks, they'll probably happen on the Fridays when they have their race, or the Saturdays when they have their races. I don't think they'll be complete one-day shows. I don't think NASCAR announced that. But at the same time, there are some benefits. And hey, at least practice and qualifying is going to come back. And at least we got something for next year. But at the same time, practice needs to be longer than 15 minutes. That's not enough time. It's basically a glorified practice session, which I wish it was longer, but those are the practice sessions and qualifying sessions for next year. I wish there was more, but at least, hey, we're getting it. I like some things about it, and I don't like some things about it. But at the same time, that's the practice for next year, and that is your practice qualifying for the 2022 season. And now we're going to move on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about 2311 Racing. Now, a couple days ago, we talked on the channel about 2311 Racing, basically saying that they were expected, and reported that they were expected to get the charter from Starcom Racing. Well, Steve Lauletta, who's the president of 2311 Racing, was on SiriusXM NASCAR radio, and he basically confirmed that they have acquired a charter from Starcom Racing, and they will have that charter from 2022 and beyond. And this is also a partnership with Spire Motorsports as well, because Spire Motorsports was originally supposed to get the charter, and that'll be going to 2311 Racing. This is a win-win for NASCAR as a whole. Let's be real about Starcom Racing. We know that Starcom Racing will not be returning next year. There have been potential talks that Starcom Racing may run at least on a part-time basis in the 2022 season, and we're basically the road courses and maybe the short tracks, maybe the super speedways as well. But basically, they confirm it's not viable for them with the charter system right now. Basically, none of the uncharted teams really getting any money at the moment. So it really wasn't viable for them going in next year to run, even on a part-time basis. So selling it to a team that's up and coming like 2311 Racing, especially with a championship caliber driver like Kurt Busch, makes a lot of sense. It also is going to make the field a lot more competitive. Would you rather have a 2311 cars or a Starcom Racing car? Just saying. I think Starcom Racing wasn't improving. They got warned by NASCAR that if they were on the third year, and NASCAR probably was going to get rid of that charter if they weren't going to improve it. This was the second year, because NASCAR has that system where it's performance-based. And if you don't perform, NASCAR is going to start, in my opinion, revoking these charters. And Rickmar Racing was on the verge of losing their 51 charter. They were luckily able to get it up there. But at the same time, we know that Rickmar is expected to downsize to a two-car operation next year. We know that probably what two teams are probably going to end up getting the charters for next year. But the good news, at least for 2311 Racing, like I said, is that they at least are going to be safe and guaranteed to get into every single race next year and have both of their cars, especially, like I said, since 2311 Racing, especially in the second half of the year, really showed major improvement. And with Kurt Busch coming over to the team next year to work with Bubba Wallace, which Bubba Wallace, let's be real, he did pretty good for his first year at that team. But again, that team was also an up-and-coming team. At the same time, there was a lot of things that they were behind on. They really didn't have their stuff till January. And with Kurt Busch coming into the team, he's either going to want to improve Bubba Wallace or probably going to expose the team a little bit at the same time. But I do think going into next year, 2311 Racing is a team that is going to improve. I expect multiple wins from the team. I think they'll at least get 2 wins, run from each driver next year. I think Kurt will win a race next year, and Bubba will win. We also know that they're going to have Booty Barker and Billy Scott work at them next year. Billy Scott and Kurt Busch really were not able to finish the relationship and the good relationship side of things that has started for them, and they also really weren't able to finish on good terms because Billy Scott got only 1 win in his career so far in Cup, but that was, of course, with, you guessed it, Kurt Busch in 2018 when he was at Stewart-Haas Racing. And Booty Barker and Bubba working together, really good combination. They like each other on the radio, and they really, really like working together as a whole. So I'm really happy to see that 2311 Racing was able to get this charter, and there was a lot of concern because they originally were going to get a charter from Front Row Motorsports, and that deal fell through at the last minute. That was expected to happen, and then that deal unfortunately fell through at the last minute. We know the Front Row is going to have 2 cars next year, and it's really good to see. Now, what's left in regards to the charter market now? There's not a lot of rides that are available in the Cup Series at the moment. There's not a lot of charters that are available. Right now, there's only 2 or 3 teams that we don't know about the charter situation right now, and that's Rickmar Racing, which they're expected to downsize a 2-car operation next year and sell 2, not 1, to their charters going into 2022. The charters are expected to be worth $12 million, and they're expected to be a ton of money. But I'm very happy, at least for sure, that 2311 Racing does have a charter for next year. Both their cars are chartered up because I was going to be really, really concerned. I mean, I wasn't going to be too concerned about Kurt Busch making races, except maybe besides the Daytona 500. But I look back at the qualifying stats and think they qualified really, really well and would have qualified in the event regardless if they had a charter or not. So this is really, really awesome as a whole that 2311 Racing has been able to get a second charter for next year. And that means that they are guaranteed, both their cars are guaranteed to make it in. Really, really exciting, and I'm happy about this for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about the next-gen test that took place at the Charlotte Oval. If you like I said, there was a Charlotte Oval test that took place on yesterday, and basically on Tuesday and Wednesday. 21 or 22 cars showed up. Most teams showed up with 1 or 2 cars. If teams had 4 cars in their stable or 3 or 4 cars, they were able to bring 2 cars out to the track. But if they only have 1 or 2, only 1 car should show up. Let's talk about day number 1. There were a few wrecks that basically happened in the time. Austin Dillon basically crashed early, and apparently it was not due to basically the car running out of control. Basically, the track was damp and very, very wet. Multiple drivers, including Alex Bowman and Ricky Stenhouse Jr., reiterated that as well, that happened. But here's the crazy thing. Austin Dillon actually returned to the track late. That's right. You would think that they were not going to be able to return to the track. But they took 6 or 7 hours on the car, and they were able to fix the track. And NASCAR actually did say that they were very, very satisfied at the time about the Austin Dillon wreck basically performed well in a crash, which is a lot better. Also, we saw Denny Hamlin spin up in turn number 3. It was a very, very lazy, a little bit of lazy spin similar to IndyCar. And William Byron. Now, a lot of people assume that was Kyle Larson, but I think we got confirmation that it was William Byron in that car. He was able to basically spun, but it had a flat tire, but he's able to save it and not get any damage. They also ran the official 550 horsepower package on day number 1. Now, there were multiple drivers that were able to talk about their thoughts on the next-gen car. And Alex Bowman says something that was very, very good to hear. He says that the car was harder to drive, and it's much more fun as well. He did say the car is harder to drive, but he said really is not a bad thing. And a lot of people have been wanting the cars to be much more difficult to drive. So that at least is a positive right there. And then Ricky Stenhouse Jr. said that the steering issues that they've had have not come up at the time, which they had done some work on the under tray to fix it. And NASCAR basically did confirm that they worked on the under tray and they were able to fix the problems. And the steering rack issues were able to be fixed. No drivers, from what I heard, complained about it from the next-gen test, which was really, really exciting. Now, one thing I want to talk about is a couple other things. Ford did have a little bit of a small pack. Now, I don't believe that they were really, really pushing the cars. Cars did look a little bit slower. Times were in the 31 to 32 second ranges. Times did creep down, I think, about the 31.2s to 31.3s. A lot of that was due to the fact, of course, one, I don't think they're pushing it as much. And I think the more experience they get in the car, the better. But they did, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. did have a video that did come out, and it did show that he was wide open. However, I did hear a little bit of, just a tiny bit of off throttle, but not very, very much. It was basically almost full throttle through. And one more thing that Bob Pockrass did confirm about Kyle Busch, because Kyle Busch has really been the only one that has not tested the next-gen car currently at the moment. He says that Kyle Busch is to likely do the next 2 to 3 tests coming up, including the next test, which, of course, we have a test coming up in Phoenix on December 14th and 15th. And also, we'll have the Daytona test on January 11th and 12th. We're expecting almost a full field to show up. And that was from day 1, which there was a lot that came out of that. Then day 2, which happened yesterday, came around. And we saw NASCAR make some changes. So NASCAR decided they were going to go ahead, at least for some teams, they decided NASCAR had an option to run an aided spoiler, which is traditional, or because of the heating issues in the car, because I think those kind of still crept up just a little bit, they basically decided to reduce the size of the spoiler from 8 inches to 7 inches, which means, you guess it, that the horsepower went up 30 horsepower from 550 to 580. And the speeds actually were able to get a lot faster on day number 2. Some of the guys were getting in the 30-second range. Now, they still were about 5 to, I think, 6 miles an hour slower than the Kyle Larson had when he qualified on the pole for the Coke 600 in 2021. But the more experience they get, the better going to be. Now, there are some things that did happen in the test. I actually did see B.J. McLeod ended up spinning. Some people said he blew up. I think he just spun. And Ryan Muddy actually saw this live, too. He got loose in the corner, but was able to save it. Now, Raj Hussain was able to speak to the media, and he says that he had 2 seconds of tire fall off in a 35-lap run. One thing that I'm very, very happy to see is that one thing I wasn't a big fan of with the Gen 6 550 package is the fact that there basically was no tire fall off. You had maybe about half a second of tire fall off in a 35-lap run. Raj Hussain saying that 2 seconds of tire fall off, that is a positive right there, because if you have tire fall off, one thing that I really will say is if you have tire fall off in the car, what that means is it's going to create multiple grooves of racing, and another thing is going to create, you guessed it, comers and goers. You're going to have comers and goers that are basically going to be able to show up, and it's just going to make the racing a lot better, in my opinion. And the fact that you're not going to also probably most likely you're not going to see full throttle racing throughout the run, maybe in the early portion of the run, but you're going to have less full throttle racing is another positive right there. Now, I will say there is a little bit of a contradictory from Chase Elliott. And Chase Elliott did talk to the media, and he said that if car races fine, he doesn't mind the slower speeds. But if entertainment does not improve, then we should go faster, which I 100% agree. I'm not a guy who's been really proponent of the speeds of the cars. Again, I think the speeds definitely need to be really important. Do not get me wrong. But at the same time, all I care about is if the car races. I don't entirely care about the horsepower of the car. Don't get me wrong. I'd rather see a lot more higher horsepower up to 750 or even 850 if we can get up to or even up to 650. But at the same time, if the car races really well, I'm not going to be entirely mad if we're at 550. If it races like IROC does, I'm not going to be entirely mad, even though I would recommend the horsepower be a little bit higher. And then near the end of the test, we actually did see Chevy's test together. There really wasn't much going on. And NASCAR talked about maybe having like an organized like packs and stuff, but basically NASCAR denied that. And Chevy and Ford, I think Ford did early in the morning on day number 2 as well. And then Chevy tested in the line. There really was a little bit of passing, not entirely a ton, but there was a little bit of passing in the test. But you also can see a little bit of the dirty air as well. And then right at the end, after the test basically included all the cars on the track, NASCAR decided to conduct some live pit stops in the final hour. And we actually got to see the live pit stops take place. Now, from one thing I noticed, the times were, I think, about 13 seconds, which is really close to what a normal pit stops with a single run. I saw some people really worried that the pit stops were not going to be great, but every other sport has single live pit stops, and every other motorsports does. And in my opinion, we need to get with the times, and I'm a fan of them going to single run nuts. Now, the tire from Chase Elliott's car, I think, tried to get back, which I thought was really funny. But at the same time, they're going to get faster. I think we're going to see times go down. The more practice these pit crews have, I assume they've probably been practicing in the shops as well. I think pit stop times are going to get faster. I would not entirely be shocked if we do end up seeing times get down into probably maybe like the 10-second range. I would not be shocked at some point we do get under 10-second pit stops in the future, which will probably mean that valve cans for fueling stuff are going to have to be a lot faster, because you might be seeing times where the fuel can may be the last thing that you're waiting on, and that's a good thing right there. I love the pit stops. I think it's going to be really good, and they'll be seeing a lot of pit stops. I wish they were doing live pit stops at the LA Coliseum, which is probably why they had the live pit stops yesterday, was because of that. Now, what are my overall thoughts about the next gen test? There's a lot that you guys probably heard right there. First of all, I wish that the cars were a little bit less wide open at the beginning. I didn't like some of the things from what I saw from Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I don't want to see completely wide open racing. That's one thing I do not want to see. But I will say that the tire fall stuff we heard from Ross Chastain yesterday, I thought that was absolutely 100% a thumbs up. Because 2 seconds tire fall, like I said, is going to create that multi-groove racing, which I think overall is going to be a really big positive as a whole. Another thing I also like to hear is that the cars are harder to drive. And I don't think these cars are going to be easy to drive. And NASCAR said they want to make these cars a lot harder to drive. And one thing I will say is that there's no side force. And with the cars basically being symmetrical. Now, one thing about the Gen 6 cars is that the cars basically were a little bit angled to the left, which created that side force. When the cars are symmetrical like this, you don't really have a lot of side force to rely on. So you're going to see a lot of talent. I expect that guys like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Tyler Reddick, Denny Hamlin, the best drivers in the world are really going to get to be shown once again throughout the year. Now, we do have a few more tests. Like I said, they're going to be coming up really soon. You're going to be seeing one next month at Phoenix, which will probably get a little bit of the shorter package as well. That's going to be with the 670 package. I wish that it was a little bit more horsepower in there, but at the same time, it really isn't the end of the world. For me, these tests, I wasn't focusing on the racing. I was really focusing on the issues. And overall, they got some of those issues fixed, which is a good thing. I think the heating issues did get fixed a little bit. I think reducing the size of that spoiler was one of the big ways that they were able to fix that issue in some aspects. But at the same time, I like some of the things I hear, but also don't like everything that I heard. For me, going into next year, because next year is such a different year, I don't really care about the speeds of the cars. I don't entirely care. I want speeds up a little bit, but I don't entirely care. All I care about is if the racing is good. And I'm going to give this car at least a year or two, because I think it's going to take time for this car to develop. I think people need to be patient with this next-gen car. I understand 100% you want the racing to be good, because we haven't really had the greatest racing. But I'm going to give this car a few years to get good. If it isn't really good over long term, I'm not going to be a fan of it. But if the car races really well, especially on the intermediate tracks, which, let's be for real, the racing has not been the greatest on intermediate tracks. The entertainment product has not been amazing for the last 8 or 9 years, besides maybe 2014, and maybe some intermediate tracks with the Gen 6 car. The racing hasn't been that exciting. I hope the racing does get better for next year. That's all that matters to me. But that's my thoughts on the next-gen test. So, anyway, that is it for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Lynn Schedule For that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about the next-gen test from Charlotte Oval? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts about 2311 officially acquiring a charter from Starcom Racing? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts overall about practice qualifying returning in some aspects for next year? Let me know that in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.